Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a time in every person's life when silence becomes their greatest rebellion. Not because they have nothing left to say, but because they've finally realized their worth isn't up for discussion. There was a time I kept shrinking myself, trying to fit into spaces never meant for me, trying to earn love like it was a currency and I was broke. I kept giving and giving and giving until I was nothing but empty hands and a quiet soul. Silence is strength, not surrender. It's one of those truths life doesn't teach you in words. It teaches you through heartbreak, disappointment, and long nights of staring at the ceiling, wondering what went wrong, you see. People often mistake silence for weakness. They think if you're not fighting, arguing, or defending yourself, then you've lost. But in reality, silence is the sharpest sword you can carry. It's the calm that comes after the storm, not because the storm passed, but because you stopped letting it shake you. Silence isn't about being passive. It's about being powerful without performance. It's knowing that not every battle is worth bleeding for. Not every insult needs a reply, and not every lie deserves your truth. There is something sacred about holding your tongue when your soul is screaming for justice, because in that restraint lies your real power. Anyone can yell, anyone can clap back, but only the truly strong can stay still, knowing they are right, without needing the world to echo it back. In a world that's constantly shouting for attention, choosing silence is like choosing invisibility, but on your own terms. It's the rebel's path. You don't need to scream your worth when you're finally sure of it. You don't need to explain your absence when you've realized your presence was never valued. That moment when you decide to say nothing, not because you've run out of words, but because your words are too expensive to be wasted, that's when you begin to win. Most people fear silence because it forces them to sit with themselves. And trust me, there's nothing louder than the sound of your own thoughts when the noise of others fades. That's why silence scares them. It reveals truths no argument ever could. When you stop reacting, you force others to face their reflection in your stillness. They expected rage, they expected chaos. Instead, they find your peace. And it haunts them. You begin to see things differently when you stop speaking just to be heard. You listen more, you observe more. You feel the shift in energies, the subtle signs, the things people say when they think you're not paying attention. And in that awareness, you find a different kind of power. The power to walk away with dignity, the power to protect your energy, the power to choose yourself without asking for permission. People who take you for granted expect you to beg. They're used to your explanations, your second chances, your late night apologies for things that weren't even your fault. But when you go silent, really silent, they start to panic, not because they miss your voice, but because your silence becomes proof that they never really mattered the way they assumed they did. And no words can undo that realization. It's not easy, of course. Choosing silence feels like betrayal to your heart, to your emotions, to that part of you that wants to shout the truth from rooftops. But strength isn't about doing what feels good in the moment. It's about doing what heals you in the long run. Holding your peace when you're dying to scream, that's real courage. Staying still when your pride is begging for revenge, that's real growth. Choosing not to stoop to their level even when you could, that's strength. Stop shrinking to fit unworthy spaces. It's a truth that hits hardest when you realize how many times you folded yourself in half just to make someone else comfortable. You begin to see it in hindsight. The conversations where you dimmed your light so theirs could shine. The moments where you held back your truth to avoid their discomfort. The times you pretended to be okay just so things wouldn't get complicated. But you weren't made to shrink. You weren't born to be small. You weren't sent into this world to tiptoe around fragile egos and half-hearted love. Shrinking becomes a habit. You don't even realize you're doing it at first. It starts with the little things. Laughing a bit less loudly. Apologizing when you've done nothing wrong. Saying it's fine when it's very much not fine. And over time, you become a watered-down version version of yourself, a silhouette, a whisper. And worst of all, you start believing that's who you really are. That maybe you are too much, too emotional, too opinionated, too ambitious. You internalize the discomfort others feel around your truth and wear it like your own flaw. But the problem was never your light. The problem was that they didn't know how to handle someone who refused to live in the shadows. People who are insecure will always ask you to dim down so they can feel tall. They will call your confidence arrogance, your passion drama, your independence selfishness. And if you're not careful, you'll start adjusting yourself to meet their lack instead of rising to your own fullness. Unworthy spaces can look like relationships, friendships, workplaces, even families. Anywhere you're asked to compromise your dignity in order to belong. Anywhere you feel like you have to earn basic respect. Anywhere your silence is more appreciated than your voice. These are the spaces that look fine on the surface, but eat away at your soul, one compromise at a time. And the longer you stay, the harder it becomes to remember what it felt like to take up space unapologetically. But you are allowed to be the full version of yourself. You are allowed to speak with volume, to feel deeply, to want more, to take up space without guilt. You are allowed to say no without explaining. You are allowed to walk away from anything that makes you feel less than what you are. There is no medal for suffering silently. There is no trophy for being the most tolerant of disrespect. You do not owe your loyalty to any space that refuses to honor your presence. What they call difficult, someone else will call powerful. What they couldn't handle, someone else will celebrate. Your truth, your intensity, your wild, radiant self is not a flaw, it's your superpower. And the moment you stop trying to fit into places you've outgrown, that's when you start to soar. There's a whole world out there that won't just accept your fire, they'll need it. The spaces that deserve you will never ask you to shrink. They will not flinch at your honesty. They will not question your worth. They will see you fully and clearly and still choose you. And when you finally walk into those spaces, you'll wonder why you ever wasted so much time making yourself small for people who didn't even bother to look closely. Pour your love back into yourself. After all the ways you've been stretched thin, after all the pieces you've handed out like candy to people who never stayed, it's time. It's time to stop begging for the kind of love you've always been so willing to give others. You've spent too long watering gardens that never bloomed for you, writing poetry with no one left to read it, and offering your heart to hands that didn't know how to hold it. Now, the only place your love needs to go is inward. It's not selfishness, it's survival. You can't keep filling everyone else's cup while yours stays empty. You've called it loyalty, you've called it kindness, but the truth is you forgot yourself somewhere along the way. You made everyone else the main character in your story, and now it's time to reclaim your own pages. To pour your love back into the cracks they left behind. To turn the softness you used to give away into armor. Not walls, but armor that protects your peace and your worth. Start with the small things. Speak kindly to yourself in the mirror. Not just when you look your best, but especially when you don't. Eat food that makes you feel alive, not just full. Rest without guilt. Say no without explanation. Learn to be okay with your own company. Romanticize your routines. The way you make your tea, the way you light a candle, the way you journal at night. Make your life a love letter to yourself. And then go deeper. Forgive yourself for all the times you stayed too long, for all the times you knew better but still hoped harder. Stop punishing yourself for loving the wrong people. That love wasn't wasted. It was proof that you can feel deeply, and that's something to honor, not regret. You've always been capable of beautiful things. You just forgot to turn that energy inward. When you start loving yourself again, it will feel strange at first. You'll reach for your phone out of habit, wanting to text someone who used to ignore you. You'll hear your inner critic, louder than usual, that voice that says, "You're not doing enough, not being enough." But love her anyway. Love yourself through the doubt, through the discomfort, because that's where healing begins. Not in perfection, but in persistence. You'll start to notice shifts. You won't tolerate what you used to. That one-sided friendship, that conditional affection, that praise that came with strings attached, it'll stop feeling flattering and start feeling fake. And instead of chasing people who drain you, you'll start protecting your peace like it's sacred. Because it is. You are not a rehab center for broken souls. You are not a background character in someone else's story. You are your own home, your own safe place. The way you treat yourself sets the tone for how others treat you. So set the standard high. Love yourself like someone who knows what she's worth, like someone who's tired of waiting for someone else to see her magic. Be the one who sees it first. Speak your name with pride. Hold your own hand through hard days. Be your own rescue, your own soft landing. You've spent enough time proving your love to others. Now it's your turn to prove it to yourself. Not in loud declarations or perfect days, but in daily choices, in boundaries, in grace, in discipline, in softness. Because when you pour your love back into yourself, you stop needing permission to feel whole. Evolve without explanation. Growth is a personal revolution, not a group discussion. You don't need to take a poll before you change your life. You don't owe anyone a press release every time you decide to leave behind the version of you that used to tolerate things that now make your soul itch. People will ask questions. They'll get uncomfortable. They'll wonder where the old you went. And you'll be tempted to explain because you were raised to be polite, to be nice, to be likable. But evolution was never meant to be polite. It was meant to be necessary. There comes a moment when the life you've been living becomes too tight, like a skin you've outgrown. You wake up and realize you don't laugh at the same jokes. You don't crave the same chaos. You're not interested in chasing approval from people who wouldn't lift a finger for you. That shift is the beginning of something holy. And it doesn't need validation. The people who truly care about your growth will never demand an explanation for it. They'll see the light in your eyes and know it came from fires you had to survive alone. When you evolve, you disrupt expectations. People get used to who you were, the always available one, the forgiving one, the soft-spoken one who swallowed her words to keep the peace. But growth doesn't ask for permission, and it certainly doesn't apologize. It tears down the walls you built to survive and replaces them with truth, with boundaries, with fire. Suddenly, you're no longer who they remember, and that threatens them. Not because you've wronged them, but because you're proof that it's possible to outgrow your own past. You'll notice how quiet it gets when you stop explaining yourself. Some people will leave, some will stay confused, some will try to guilt you into shrinking again. But that silence, that space, that's where you meet your future self. The one who no longer waits for a green light to shine. The one who walks into rooms without wondering who she needs to become to be accepted. You start to move with intention, with clarity, with a kind of confidence that doesn't come from compliments but from alignment. There's power in not defending your decisions. Power in saying, this is who I am now, without adding a footnote. You don't have to prove that your healing is valid. You don't need a list of traumas to justify why you're choosing peace. You don't need to explain why your standards have risen or why your circle has shrunk. The truth is, not everyone deserves access to your process. Growth is sacred, it's private, it's messy, and it's yours. You are not who you used to be, and that's the point. You're not here to stay in one version of yourself forever. You're not a statue, you're a soul, meant to move, meant to shift, meant to expand beyond the places where your voice used to tremble. People will say you've changed like it's an insult. Let them. Because staying the same to keep others comfortable is the slowest form of self-betrayal. When you evolve, the world will adjust, or it won't. But that's not your burden to carry. What matters is that you are becoming who you were always meant to be. Not someone who fits into others' stories, but someone who writes her own. Your transformation is not a public debate. It's a quiet unfolding, a rising, a return to self. Peace is greater than revenge. Not because revenge isn't tempting. It is. It burns hot and fast and makes you feel powerful for a moment. It whispers to your pride, feeds your ego, and gives you something to do with the pain. But peace doesn't shout. Peace doesn't come dressed in drama or applause. Peace is subtle. It's quiet. It arrives slowly like the dawn, but once it's there, it stays. Revenge might satisfy your anger, but peace heals your soul. There's a kind of strength in choosing not to retaliate. Not because you couldn't, but because you know it's not worth the cost. Revenge is time, energy, obsession. It's crafting messages you'll never send. It's replaying moments that already hurt you once, now hurting you again in memory. It's planning how to make someone else feel what they made you feel, thinking that'll bring closure. But it never does. It just binds you to them in a cycle you were meant to outgrow. Peace doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean denying the pain or pretending you were never wounded. It means refusing to let the pain become your personality. It means letting go of the need to be understood by people who were never listening. It means choosing your healing over their punishment. Because what if your freedom isn't in seeing them suffer, but in simply not caring anymore? It's a radical act to walk away, to heal in silence, to flourish without dragging someone through the mud. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. Peace is looking at the ruins and choosing to rebuild instead of lighting another fire. Peace is trusting that karma, the universe, life, whatever you believe in, has its own way of balancing things. And more than that, it's knowing you don't need someone else's downfall to validate your worth. Revenge makes you reactive. Peace makes you powerful. One feeds off the past, the other feeds your future. And while revenge keeps you tied to the story where you were the victim, peace hands you the pen and says, write a new chapter. Not a chapter where you get even, but one where you get free. One where your happiness doesn't come from someone else's regret, but from your own growth, your own joy, your own becoming. When you choose peace, you begin to realize how expensive anger is. It costs sleep. It costs creativity, it costs presence. Peace, on the other hand, gives you everything revenge never could. Clarity, wholeness, perspective. You stop living with clenched fists and start creating with open hands. You no longer carry their actions on your shoulders. You learn to set them down and walk away lighter, wiser, stronger. People might call it soft. They might say you're letting them get away with it. But what they don't see is the fire it takes to stay calm. What they don't understand is that walking away isn't surrender, it's evolution. It's choosing not to become what hurt you. It's refusing to let bitterness rewrite your story. It's letting your peace scream louder than any revenge ever could. Peace allows you to reclaim your energy, to put it where it matters, into dreams, into purpose, into people who love you right, into a life that's no longer defined by what you lost, but by what you built after the storm. Peace is the quiet revenge, the kind that doesn't show up at their door, but shows up in your glow, your laugh, your freedom. It's not about making them sorry, it's about making yourself whole. Let your growth speak louder than your pain, because at some point the story isn't about what broke you, it's about how you rebuilt. Pain has a voice, no doubt. It screams, it echoes, it demands attention, but growth is quieter. It doesn't need to shout because it's rooted. It shows up in your posture, in your peace, in the way you no longer chased what once chased you away. Growth is the silent proof that you didn't just survive, you transform. It's easy to let pain take the spotlight, to wear it like a badge, to build an identity around what you've endured. After all, pain gets sympathy, it gets validation, but growth asks more from you. It demands work, responsibility, and patience. It's not glamorous. It happens in the dark, behind closed doors, while no one is clapping. But when it starts to show, it's undeniable. It's in the boundaries you set. It's in the way you choose silence over reacting. It's in the way you no longer explain your worth to people who made a habit of questioning it. Pain wants you to stay stuck, to relive the moment, to repeat the story. But growth wants you to rise, not just move on, but move up. It wants you to learn, to stretch, to evolve. There's a point where telling your story becomes less about healing and more about staying attached to the wound. And that's when you know it's time to let your growth do the talking. People will notice the shift. They'll sense something different. They'll wonder how you became so grounded, so focused, so calm. They'll ask what changed. And you won't need a dramatic monologue. You won't need to revisit every chapter of the pain. You'll just smile, and in that smile will live every sleepless night, every tear you refuse to let break you, every time you chose to keep going when quitting felt easier. Letting your growth speak doesn't mean denying the pain. It means choosing not to give it the microphone forever. It means saying, yes, this happened, but look at who I became because of it. It's a reclaiming of power, a decision to live from a place of strength rather than from a wound that keeps bleeding. You are not what happened to you. You are what you did with it. There's dignity in restraint. There's power in not airing every scar, because you've earned the right to be more than the worst thing that ever happened to you. You've earned the right to be defined by your resilience, not your ruin. Growth doesn't erase the pain. It just gives it purpose. It takes the ashes and turns them into something solid, something sacred. Sometimes growth is quiet because it's internal. It's the thoughts you no longer entertain, the habits you've broken, the patterns you've rewritten. It's in the fact that you're not triggered by what used to destroy you. That's real progress. And that kind of growth doesn't need an announcement. It radiates. It walks into a room before you do. It speaks in the way you carry yourself. It lives in your choices. Let your healed heart do the talking. Let your calm be the answer. Let your joy confuse the ones who once hurt you. Not because you're pretending, but because you've done the work, you've faced the mirror, you've cleaned the mess, and now you're building quietly, boldly, without waiting for applause, without needing to revisit every chapter. Your life becomes the proof. Your peace becomes the testimony. Your future becomes the reply.